Din di di din din di 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 din din di di di. Hi da di da di. Hi da di da. Hi da di da da. Yum. Di da da. Ya di da 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 da. Ya di da 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 da. Die, 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 and die, die. I die, 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 die. Keeping the simcha going, we are live with some Torah here on Shushan Purim. We hope everybody had a wonderful Purim and is enjoying the Shushan Purim. We're going to learn from the Sfas Emes this morning on Parsha Tzav. Zois Toiras Ha'oile. We're learning Lalis and Shem of the Shul and Ryan family who were killed by the Nazis, Yimach, Shmam, V'Zaram, in the World War II, terrible tragedies that befell the Jewish people then, and may their neshamas have an aliyah. We're also learning for a full shlema for all the cholim, all those who need healing. We have in mind David ben Sophia Lin Bas Fatsalia Maya Bat Sarah Yisrael ben Yochevet Aliza Chana Bas Diner Elia Hershel Mendel Chaim ben Sheva Leah Bas Freda Nov Aaron ben Mindel Ruth Bas Sarah Goldman Yitzchak ben Dvorah Dina Bas Mindel Aaron ben Git Amram ben Shoshana Dana ben Verach Chaim ben Esther Azunom Sarah Bat Sheva Brocha Chai Sarah Nachman Hershel Tzilia Harriet Bat Lillian Emmanuel ben Juliet Benjamin Sarah Yeshua ben Bluma Chabas Etta Chabas Dina Klar Bas Etta Karen Shannon Bat Rachel, all those who need a refuah shlema, and also we're learning Aliyas Hashama, Rav Kanievsky, who passed away in Eretz Yisrael. This parsha begins, Vayikra, it says, Zois Torah Oila. This is the law of the elevation offering. The pasuk continues. This is an elevation offering on the flame on the altar all night, and the Kohen shall dress and separate the ashes of what is the fire consumed and place it next to the altar. So it's a seemingly innocuous description. Seemingly innocuous description of what the Kohen, the play-by-play, what the Kohen does with the offering and with the ashes of the offering. But of course, nothing's in the Torah to offer play-by-play. Everything has a lesson, a message within it. So first, Sfas Emes is attracted to the Korban Olah. What does it represent? So first, let's remember the Korban Olah. There are many korbanot, offerings, that were given in the temple. The Korban Olah, from the word like la'alot, to go up, an elevation offering, as some call it. It burns on the mizbeach all night until it turns into ashes. And these ashes then have this special part of the service of the Kohen. The Kohen lifts up some of the ashes and places them there near the mizbeach. And there's actually a name for this. It's called Trumas Hadeshin. And it has a special significance. It's the first activity of the day in the Beis HaMikdash. This is what gets things off the ground. This is the first thing that's happening. Trumas Hadeshin is also the last activity of the day, concluding the avoda. And the Sfas Emes tells us that Trumas Hadeshin was the culmination of the avoda, of the holy service in the temple. Shekol hakorban talui b'Trumas Hadeshin. That the entire offering is dependent on this final point of the process, the Trum Sedeshin. The Sfas Emes begins by referring, as he often does, to the Midrash. And the text of the Midrash, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, is quoted in telling us that the objective of Korban Olah, what's the purpose of a Korban Olah, is to help a person atone for bad thoughts. Bad thoughts. You know, as an aside, we today, you know, when you look into psychology, we know how much a person's thoughts can lead them in the wrong directions. We're not even talking about thoughts, God forbid, about doing anything terrible. They're just bad thoughts about themselves. But let's continue. It's not so clear what the connection are between the Korban Olah and the improper thoughts. So the Midrash explains, citing Reb Levi, this Amora is a colleague of Reb Yochanan, who in turn had been a Talmud of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. So this is from Shimon Bar Yochai to Rabbi Yochanan to Rabbi Levi to us. And Rabbi Levi answers our questions about what is the connection between Korban Olah and improper thoughts. He says, look at the pasuk in Yechezkel, look at what the prophet wrote. Ha'oile al rochochem hayu loy siyeh. As for what enters your mind, it shall not be. So this verse's use of the word olah, ha'olah, even though it's in a very different sense, brings to mind the Korban Olah and the fact that the choice of these words is in the context of thought. What comes to your mind is also relevant. So in Lashon, in Hebrew, right, we say that a thought arises in one's mind. We say it in English too. Right? You can have thought enter the mind, but you also can have a thought arise in your mind. So now we see, just like a Korban Olah is an elevation offering, so now it's connected to thoughts which arise in our mind. So things that arise in your mind that you shouldn't be doing or that are improper is one thing, but here we're talking about something maybe you want to do which isn't right. It can also be, we expand upon that. You know, anything that is, you know, let's say it could even be some really terrible thoughts about another person. So now we understand a little bit how the Midrash got us to the place of understanding. But the Sfas Emes doesn't come forward and say, okay, improper thoughts, bad. Rather, it's an obvious fact of life that we have thoughts that come to our mind which are not always the best. And again, it could run the gamut. There's a whole host of them. We don't have to explore that idea. Just the idea that things come to mind, they arise in our mind, and sometimes it's you can't help it. They just arise in your mind. So it's a fact of life, of human life, that things come up in our minds. What the Sfas Emes is doing in this Torah is trying to teach us what do we do with those things that come up in our mind. So there's a passage in the Zohar which gives a reading of the verse which we quoted above. just like the korban olah can be burnt on the offering, on the mizbech, it's burnt all night, so too these bad thoughts can be burned on the altar of our heart. I'll say it one more time. The korban olah, the offering in the temple, is burned up on the altar in the temple, and so too our thoughts that we want to extinguish, bad thoughts, can be burnt on the altar of our hearts. What does it mean to burn them on the altar of our hearts? Well, the Sfas Emes gives us two sources of that fire that's going to burn it up. One, Mesiras Nefesh. That's the Mesiras Nefesh, right, is literally self-sacrifice, but it doesn't have to be so dramatic. Mesiras Nefesh is the dedication which a person has in order to fulfill the mitzvahs during the day, right? It requires Mesiras Nefesh. Right? It's not Mesiras Nefesh is not a black and white. It's scale. So any thing that a person's doing to keep the mitzvot, this is a level of Mesiras Nefesh. And the other, quoting the Baal Shem Tov, is enthusiasm. There's an enthusiasm burning in the heart of every Yid, and that enthusiasm is also a flame which can be used to burn up the bad thoughts. So we have two weapons in our arsenal of how to handle these thoughts. One is Mesiras Nefesh, which is the devotion, the dedication, and the other is the hislavos, enthusiasm, which is burning inside each one of us. We haven't forgotten the ashes, the Trumas Adeshin. We'll get there. So what happens to the korban olah? It gets burnt up and it's just left with these ashes. The ashes are representative that what was there is no longer there. That there's just this residue, this just residual. The actual thing that you brought that offered up is gone. It was transformed into something which is harmless. So that is the comparison. By burning up these improper thoughts through our enthusiasm or our devotion, we render those bad thoughts harmless, just like the ashes. And a secondary benefit is that it elevates our own personal service when we're able to, right, burn up bad thoughts. So in other words, the bad thoughts have a purpose in that they help elevate us when we burn them up on the altar of our heart. So a bad thought can become a good thing. Ki kol yerida hi letzarech aliyah. It's a very important concept. Very important concept in Chassidus. Kol yerida hu tzarech aliyah. Right? Every step down is actually, right? In order to step up, sometimes you have to take that step down in order to go higher. In order to succeed in one's service, in one's practice, spiritual practice, it's necessary sometimes to trip and fall initially, or, on this path. And it's not just the Sfas Emes saying this idea to encourage us, not just saying, don't worry, you tripped and fall, but you're going to get up stronger than before. No, it's so much, 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 much deeper than that. The Sfas Emes shows us, look at how the world was created. First came night and darkness. Only after that could come the light of the morning. Vayhi erev, vayhi boker. Vayhi erev, vayhi boker. First there was evening, and then there was morning. First there was darkness, and then there was light. It's not just feel-good psychology. This is the way Hashem created the world. And then that's why the psychological insight that he's giving us is supported by the Torah. Trumas Adeshin is a symbol of this, of our spiritual lives. Even improper thoughts have a positive feature. So we can get to a higher, better mindset, not by fighting to keep everything in our mind perfect, but rather by taking those thoughts and, as it were, burning them up. And by being burnt on the mizbech, on the altar, right, of our heart, they're transformed into deshen, into this inert substance which isn't going to hurt us. One deshen, one of the translation of deshen is fat, but in a good way, as they will be deshenim, they will be fat and flourishing, right? In other words, they will be healthy. So by dealing with our improper thoughts, those things which are, maybe a person has a thought to do something, chas v'sholom, not good. Or two, they have bad thoughts about other people. Or three, they have bad thoughts about themselves, God forbid. And that's, and not according to great people who I admire a lot. They say that this is one of the biggest challenges of our time, is people, they're not believing in themselves, and this is Rabbi Nachman brought this down, and others. And we burn them up on the altar of the Mizbech through enthusiasm and through devotion, and change it into something good. Now, before we wrap this up, though, we still have to work with this word truma. So truma is connected to the word romamus, like larom, to lift up. You're lifting something up. So the Sfas Emes sees in this word truma as also a remez, as a hint of victory. That truma is connected to rising up. And when you talk about lifting something up, it connotes victory over something. So the victory over our bad thinking is an occasion to draw encouragement. We need to be encouraged by this and realize our spiritual capacity can be always victorious and higher and higher and higher. And it's a beautiful image. This Kohen lifts up the ashes. That's what the Kohen does. And you think about it, it seems like such an insignificant little fact. The Kohen, oh, look, it's burnt up. Right? It might even be like an inspection. If you look from a side, you're not really what's going on. You see the Kohen lifting up the ashes. Oh, he's just making sure it's all burnt up. No. It's so much deeper, right? Showing that what was there is no longer there, and now it's been rendered inert, and you have achieved a level of victory by raising it up. So when the Kohen lifts up that burnt offering, he's reminding us of the spiritual victories that we can win as well. Holy Chevra, thank you so much for tuning in and listening today to our shir. We hope everybody has a phenomenal Shabbos, an inspired Shabbos, an uplifted Shabbos. Let's use this deep, deep Torah that we just learned about the Trumas Hadeshin to elevate our spiritual practice, and may we merit the uplifting of the whole world